I sit in lotus position, watching the sunset through the window of my small room in the monastery. The elongated shadows dance on the walls, reminding me of the transient nature of all things. My name is Andrew, and I have been a Buddhist monk for over 2 decades. Today I feel compelled to share a story, a tale about ancient wisdom, subtle energy, and an extraordinary plant that has the power to transform lives. It all began many years ago when I was just a young novice, eager to learn the secrets of the universe. My master, the Venerable Father Thomas, was known for his profound wisdom and love for nature. One day he called me to his room, a simple space but filled with a serene energy that seemed to emanate from every object. "Andrew," he said, his eyes shining with ancient knowledge, "today I will teach you about the hidden power that resides in our environment. Every element around us is a reflection of our inner life and has the potential to influence our destiny." I nodded, intrigued, as he slowly rose and walked to a tall, upright plant in the corner of the room. Its long, pointed leaves rose towards the sky, like green swords guarding a secret treasure. "This," he said, gently caressing one of the leaves, "is known in the West as mother-in-law's tongue, but for us it's much more than a funny name. This plant carries with it an ancestral wisdom capable of impacting our energy and prosperity." I approached, fascinated by the plant that had always been there, but which I had never really noticed. "Master," I asked, "how can a simple plant have so much power?" Father Thomas smiled, that smile that always made me feel as if I was about to unravel one of the great mysteries of the universe. "Andrew, nothing in this world is simple. Each being, each object, each particle of dust carries within it the essence of the whole. This plant in particular has the ability to purify the air around us, not just physically but energetically." He paused, allowing his words to penetrate my mind. "But," he continued, his tone becoming more serious, "like all powerful things, it must be treated with respect and wisdom. Its location in a space can be the key to unlocking prosperity, or if poorly positioned, can even attract bad luck." My eyes widened at this revelation. The idea that the simple position of a plant could have such an impact on our lives seemed both fascinating and a little frightening. "How can we know where to place it, Master?" Father Thomas smiled again. "Ah, my young apprentice, that's the right question. The answer, like many things in life, is neither simple nor straightforward. It requires observation, intuition, and above all, respect for the ancestral wisdom that has been passed down to us." He gently guided me out of the room towards the monastery garden. The fresh mountain air filled my lungs as we walked among the carefully cultivated flowers and herbs. "Look," he said, pointing to a particular bed, "here we have several mother-in-law's tongues planted in different positions. Observe how they grow, how they relate to the plants around them, how they respond to sunlight and shade." I spent the following days closely observing the plants, making meticulous notes about their growth, the direction of their leaves, even the way the light seemed to dance on their surfaces. Slowly, I began to notice subtle patterns, connections that had previously escaped me. One morning, while meditating in the garden, I had a sudden realization. I ran to Father Thomas's room, almost breathless with excitement. "Master," I exclaimed, "I think I understand. The mother-in-law's tongues seem to thrive best when they're facing east, receiving the first rays of the morning sun. And when they're near a water source like our little stream, their leaves seem more vibrant and full of life." Father Thomas nodded, a gleam of approval in his eyes. "Very good, Andrew. You're beginning to see beyond the surface. But remember, physical position is just the beginning. The real magic happens when we align the plant's energy with the energy of the space and the people who inhabit it." In the months that followed, I delved deeply into the study of mother-in-law's tongue and its relationship with feng shui, the ancient Chinese art of harmonizing the environment. I learned that when placed in the east corner of a room, it could attract prosperity and growth. In the south, it could increase fame and recognition. In the west, it could strengthen relationships, while in the north, it could boost career and life path. But most importantly, I learned that the intention and consciousness with which we care for the plant were as crucial as its location. A mother-in-law's tongue placed with love and gratitude, Father Thomas taught me, will radiate that positive energy, no matter where it is. As my knowledge grew, I began to share this information with visitors to the monastery. People came from far and wide to learn about the hidden power of this seemingly common plant. One day, a young woman named Emily came to the monastery. Her eyes were full of sadness and despair. "I've come seeking peace and prosperity," she said. "My life seems to be in constant turmoil, and nothing I do seems to improve things." I guided Emily through the garden, showing her our mother-in-law's tongues and explaining their significance. Her eyes lit up with new hope. "Can I take one of these plants home?" she asked eagerly. "Of course," I replied, "but remember, the plant is just a tool. True change must begin within you." I helped Emily choose a small mother-in-law's tongue and instructed her on how to care for it and where to place it in her home. "Put it in the east corner of your living room," I suggested, "and every day as you water it, express gratitude for all the blessings in your life, no matter how small they may be." Months passed, and Emily returned to the monastery. Her face was radiant, a remarkable transformation from the downcast woman I had met. "The plant," she exclaimed, "changed everything. My house feels lighter, more cheerful. I got a promotion at work, and even my relationships have improved." I smiled, happy for her progress, but knowing that the real change came from within her. The mother-in-law's tongue had been just a catalyst, a daily reminder to cultivate gratitude and awareness. Years passed, and my reputation as the mother-in-law's tongue monk grew. People from all corners of the world came seeking guidance on how to use this plant to transform their lives. I welcomed them with joy, but always emphasized that the plant was just a symbol, an anchor for their own spiritual journey. If you're enjoying the advice, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. We return to the story. Over time, I began to travel, taking this wisdom beyond the monastery walls. I gave lectures in community centers, universities, and even businesses. I saw how this ancient knowledge could bring a new perspective to the busy lives of the modern world. On one of these trips, I met Charles, an executive from a large company. He was skeptical at first, doubting that a simple plant could make any difference in his stressed and chaotic life. "Look," he said with an ironic smile, "I've tried everything. Meditation, yoga, even hypnosis. Nothing seems to calm my mind or bring balance to my life. How can a plant do what specialists couldn't?" I smiled, recognizing in him the same skepticism I once had. "Charles," I replied calmly, "the mother-in-law's tongue isn't magic. It won't solve your problems or change your life overnight. What it offers is an opportunity, a focal point for your intention and attention." I explained to Charles how the daily practice of caring for the plant, observing it, and tuning into its energy could be a form of active meditation. Each time you water the plant, imagine you're nurturing your own dreams and aspirations. When you clean its leaves, visualize yourself clearing your mind of negative thoughts. Something in my words seemed to touch Charles. He agreed to try, more out of curiosity than real conviction. I gave him a small mother-in-law's tongue and detailed instructions on how to care for it and where to place it in his office. Months later, I received an email from Charles. His words overflowed with enthusiasm. "Brother Andrew," he wrote, "I never imagined I'd say this, but that plant changed my life. At first it seemed silly, but the daily ritual of caring for it became a moment of peace in my chaotic day. I began to notice subtle changes. I was calmer, more focused. My colleagues commented on my new attitude. I even closed the biggest deal of my career." Charles's story wasn't unique. Over the years, I received countless reports from people whose lives had been transformed by the simple practice of caring for a mother-in-law's tongue with intention and awareness. However, I also learned that not all experiences were positive. Occasionally, I heard stories of people reporting bad luck or negative energy after placing the plant in their homes. Investigating further, I usually discovered that the plant had been placed in an inappropriate location or that the person wasn't caring for it with the necessary attention and respect. This led me to emphasize even more the importance of intention and conscious care. The mother-in-law's tongue, I always said, is like a mirror for our own energy. If we treat it with neglect or fear, it will reflect that back to us. But if we treat it with love and respect, it will amplify that positive energy. As my understanding deepened, I began to see the mother-in-law's tongue not just as a tool for individual prosperity, but as a symbol of our connection with the natural world and with each other. At a conference on sustainability, I used the mother-in-law's tongue as a metaphor for our relationship with the planet. Just as this plant can purify the air in our homes, I explained, each of us has the power to purify and harmonize our larger environment. When we care for the earth with the same attention and respect we dedicate to this plant in our homes, we create a field of positive energy that benefits everyone. This message resonated deeply with many people. Soon I was being invited to speak at environmental events, schools, and even government meetings. The humble mother-in-law's tongue was becoming a powerful symbol of personal and planetary transformation. One day, I was invited to give a talk at a maximum security prison. Initially, I was apprehensive. How would the inmates react to a monk talking about plants and energy? To my surprise, the response was impressive. Many of the inmates connected deeply with the idea that, even in such a restricted environment, they could create a space of peace and transformation. We worked together to create a garden of mother-in-law's tongues in the prison yard, and the results were remarkable. Guards reported a significant decrease in violent incidents, and many inmates spoke about how the daily care of the plants gave them a new sense of purpose and hope. As my journey continued, I began to see the mother-in-law's tongue not just as a plant, but as a teacher. It taught me about resilience. Its ability to thrive in adverse conditions was a powerful lesson in adaptability and inner strength. Its slow-growing nature constantly reminded me of the importance of patience and perseverance in our spiritual journey. Years passed and my hair turned grey. I returned to the monastery where my journey had begun, feeling that the circle was closing. Father Thomas, now very old, welcomed me with a warm smile. "Andrew," he said, his voice weak but full of wisdom, "you have learned the lesson of the mother-in-law's tongue well. Now it's your turn to pass this knowledge on." I then realized that my journey was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. I began to train young monks, sharing not only the technical knowledge about the plant, but also the deeper lessons it had to teach. A young novice, Peter, reminded me very much of myself when I was young, eager, full of questions, sometimes impatient. One day, he came to me, frustrated. "Master Andrew," he said, "I've been caring for my mother-in-law's tongue for months, but I don't see any change in my life. Maybe this whole plant energy business is just an illusion." I smiled, recognizing in him my own youthful impatience. "Peter," I said gently, "change isn't always immediately visible. The mother-in-law's tongue grows slowly, its roots deepening silently into the earth before we can see any change above ground. Our spiritual transformation often follows the same pattern." I took Peter to the garden and asked him to sit silently in front of a mother-in-law's tongue for an hour. "Observe carefully," I instructed. "Not just with your eyes, but with your whole being." When I returned, I found Peter with tears in his eyes. "Master," he whispered, I felt something. At first, it seemed like nothing was happening, but the more I observed, the more I noticed. The subtle movement of the leaves in the breeze, the way the light danced on its surface. And then, it was as if I could feel the plant's energy pulsing in tune with my own. I nodded, satisfied. "You've just taken the first step on a deeper journey, Peter. The mother-in-law's tongue isn't just a tool to change our external circumstances. It's a mirror for our consciousness, a portal to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us." In the years that followed, I saw Peter flourish, just like the mother-in-law's tongue he cared for with so much love. He became a talented teacher in his own right, taking the teachings beyond the monastery walls to underprivileged communities that would never have access to this knowledge otherwise. One day, Peter returned from one of his teaching trips with a fascinating story. He had visited a small village in the mountains where people had been struggling with poverty and internal conflicts for generations. Peter introduced the practice of cultivating mother-in-law's tongues as a community project. At first, people were skeptical, he told me, but as they worked together to care for the plants, something began to change. Neighbors who barely spoke before started sharing gardening tips. Children gathered to water the plants, creating a sense of shared responsibility. And slowly, the atmosphere of the village began to transform. Months later, Peter took me to visit the village. The transformation was remarkable. Where there was once tension and mistrust, there was now a palpable sense of community and hope. The mother-in-law's tongues had become a symbol of their resilience and unity. This experience made me reflect on how the simple act of caring for a plant could have such profound ramifications. It wasn't just about individual prosperity, but about creating connections, nurturing communities, and restoring our relationship with nature. Inspired by this idea, I initiated a global project called Mother-in-Law's Tongues for Peace. We worked with communities in conflict zones around the world, using the cultivation of mother-in-law's tongue as a tool for peace building and collective healing. In a particularly tense area between two rival ethnic communities, we organized a community garden of mother-in-law's tongues on the border between their territories. At first, there was resistance from both sides. But gradually, people began to gather to care for the plants. Hesitant conversations about gardening techniques evolved into deeper dialogues. Children from both communities played together among the tall plants. A year later, when I returned to the area, I was moved to see that the garden had expanded, with members of both communities working side by side. A local elder told me with tears in his eyes, "These plants have done more for peace than decades of political negotiations." As the project grew, I began to see fascinating patterns emerging. In areas where mother-in-law's tongues were cultivated with collective intention and care, we noticed improvements, not only in interpersonal relationships, but also in the overall health of the community, economic prosperity, and even local environmental quality. Scientists began to take an interest in the phenomenon. Studies were initiated to investigate whether there was any scientific basis for the observed effects. While some remained skeptical, others began to theorize about subtle energy fields and the impact of focused collective attention. One day, I received an unexpected call. It was from the United Nations. They had heard about the Mother-in-Law's Tongues for Peace project and were interested in implementing it on a larger scale as part of their peace-building efforts. I was invited to speak at the UN General Assembly. As I prepared for the speech, I reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple lesson from my master so many years ago. Before the world leaders, I shared not only the successes of the project, but also the deeper lessons that the mother-in-law's tongue teaches us, the importance of patience, resilience, conscious care, and the interconnection of all things. This plant, I concluded, reminds us that true prosperity is not just material but spiritual. It teaches us that by caring for something outside ourselves with attention and love, we cultivate those same qualities within us. And when we do this collectively, we have the power to transform not just our individual lives, but entire communities and, who knows, the world. The impact was immediate and profound. Countries began implementing mother-in-law's tongue diplomacy programs, using the joint cultivation of the plant as a tool to build bridges between nations in conflict. In the years that followed, I saw the wisdom of the mother-in-law's tongue spread in ways I could never have imagined. Schools began incorporating its cultivation into their curricula, teaching children valuable lessons about responsibility, patience, and connection with nature. Companies adopted the practice as part of their corporate wellness programs, reporting significant improvements in employee morale and productivity. But perhaps the most exciting development was the emergence of a new generation of mother-in-law's tongue guardians, young people dedicated to spreading this ancient wisdom in innovative and creative ways. A young entrepreneur created an app that connected people around the world who cultivated mother-in-law's tongues, allowing them to share experiences and mutual support. An artist used the plants as a medium to create interactive installations that explored themes of growth, transformation, and interconnection. As I observed these developments, I felt a deep gratitude. The mother-in-law's tongue, this silent teacher, had touched countless lives, including my own, in ways I could never have predicted. On my 80th birthday, I returned once again to the monastery where it all began. Father Thomas's room, now deceased, had been transformed into a sanctuary. In the center, growing strong and vibrant, was the original mother-in-law's tongue he had shown me so many years ago. I sat in front of the plant, closing my eyes in meditation. I reflected on the incredible journey this simple plant had inspired, a journey of self-discovery, healing, and global connection. In that moment of silence, I felt as if I could hear Father Thomas's voice whispering, "Remember, Andrew, true wisdom is not in the plant itself, but in what it awakens within us." I opened my eyes, feeling a deep peace and a renewed sense of purpose. The journey of the mother-in-law's tongue was far from over. In fact, I felt we were just at the beginning of something truly transformative. As I rose to leave, I gently touched one of the plant's leaves. "Thank you," I whispered. not just to the plant, but for all the lessons, experiences, and connections it had brought to my life and to the world. I left the sanctuary, ready for the next chapter of this extraordinary journey. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. And at that moment, I knew that as long as there are people willing to listen to the silent lessons of nature, there will always be hope for a more harmonious and interconnected world.